Welcome to Integrative You Radio, hosted by Dr. Nick Carruthers and yours truly, Dr. Nicole Rivera. This is the place where you become limitless. We are covering the latest and greatest topics, of course, in a disruptive fashion, around integrative medicine, mental health, and human behavior. We are also covering how those topics affect the human and family dynamics. We will be sprinkling in some truth bombs for our healthpreneurs so they can join us in our mission to evolve healthcare. If you are health curious and growth focused, you are in the right place. But buckle up, because this is real, this is raw, and this is disruptive. This is Integrative You Radio. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Integrative You Radio. If you're on video with us, my hat is disappearing with this lovely green screen I got going on. But so, hey, I have a hat on at moments and then I don't. But we have a lovely guest who is a dear friend of mine, Brendan Vermeire. Did I say it right?
You did.
Okay. Like Oscar Mayer, he said.
You'll never forget that.
I'll never forget it. And he runs two different companies, and I'm going to let him share a little bit more about that. But Metabolic Solutions has actually been such an amazing avenue of education for other practitioners in our functional medicine arena. And we just had this very fantastic little passionate conversation prior to getting on this podcast about our industry. And so the theme of this podcast is functional medicine or dysfunctional medicine. So it's going to be a good one, guys. So, buckle up, strap in, get ready. But before we dive into that topic, I want Brendan to tell you a little bit about himself, what he's doing, and then we're just going to go for it.
Sounds good. I appreciate you having me, Nicole. It's been too long, and excited to do this show with you, get you on my show, and I'm sure we'll continue the conversation because might get a little spicy today, and that's something I think we've always kind of bonded over. Is I think we are more candid, than I think we both like to keep it raw, keep it real, keep it candid. I don't want to disillusion anybody, that's for sure. And I think there's way too much of that in the space, as I'm sure we'll get into. So just to kind of help everybody understand what I'm all about, like ultimately, I really am just passionate about teaching a more functional approach to mental and metabolic health. My background is very metabolic physiology, biochemistry, fitness, nutrition. That's my origins and roots. I think there's a severe lack of that in the functional medicine space, and it's starting to get better. These days it's like I'm seeing more, white coat doctors that get up on stage and say like, oh, muscle fixes everything. It's like, okay, that's the cutting edge science that's circulating these days. Great. And so I have a few different kind of businesses. I've got the institute where I train practitioners. I've got the practice where we work with clients and, put out educational offerings. Then I also have a not-for-profit research and education foundation. And that's the long term. That's the dream. It's really not up and running right now because I don't have any funding. I don't have donors. I'm just a bootstrapping entrepreneur that's trying to do some good in the world. So the foundation, the whole point is we're going to be providing the public with education, teaching the public how to better optimize your mental metabolic health, while also serving those in need, while concomitantly doing clinical research. So fortunately, I have some commercial partners that I'm doing research with and kind of creating that model. And then I hope to replicate it further through the foundation in time. So still kind of getting the word out about it and getting operations up and running.
I love it. It's interesting what you're saying, the bigger picture, the bigger dream, because I personally classify myself as a investigator data junkie. People will say, oh, you're a doctor. I'm like, but more importantly is I'm literally an investigator and I'm obsessed with data. I really do not like the aspect of our industry where people are either using textbook, because unfortunately that is not helping the population at this point, and they're just looking at everyone as the same, and they're finding that quote unquote root cause, which nowadays you'll find, oh, your nervous system is stressed, oh, everything is in your gut, And I feel like in our industry, something new is trending every few months and everybody wants to get on the bandwagon and talk about it, but we're confusing people. And this was really
Yeah.
the highlight of what we were talking about is we're we're confusing people, and there is such a sea of mixed information and bad information.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, like, I try to look at a situation. I want to look at it from all angles, right? Because, all too often, I think it's just kind of immaturity and arrogance and emotional reactivity. Everybody just wants to point the finger, like, consumers, patients, clients, self-healers, people, they want to point the finger at, well, conventional medicine failed me, and then functional medicine failed me, and I'm a victim, right? And then, functional medicine practitioners will point the finger the other way. And it's like, it's a co-created problem, right? Because, and I think a lot of it is very much propagated by the nature of the internet, specifically social media, specifically the algorithm, where it highly encourages content that's going to be more provocative. There has to be a neurological hook, right? Like, if you don't grab their fleeting attention instantly with something that's kind of potent, right? So it's going to, by nature, encourage content creators to use more sensationalized and exaggerated languaging, or something, you either have to like seduce people, piss them off, or enchant them in a millisecond. And that's just to get their attention long enough to maybe like read the caption or whatever. But I think there's too many fads, too much sensationalism, too many absolutes, not enough holding space for duality and nuance, right? And also, too, I just think we are way overcomplicating everything. And a lot of times these kind of overcomplications are driven by a lot of stuff that's like pretty theoretical. Like, I'll spit out an example, because in recent weeks, I was refurbishing and updating my like methylation and nutrigenomics course, right? And so in this course, I was teaching this as an example of like, okay, everybody's freaking out about MTHFR these days because it's gotten bigger and hotter because of that Joe Rogan podcast, and then it's like, so everybody's focused on this one gene. Now, the human genome has what, 20 to 25,000 protein coding genes. And out of those, 25,000 genes, so far to date, over 88 million single nucleotide polymorphisms have been identified, which basic math would tell you that there's a lot of SNPs for every single gene. And even with MTHFR, the only two SNPs people are looking at are the 677 and 1298, when in reality, there's 14 clinically relevant SNPs just for MTHFR. Like, we are so far from knowing all the, compensatory interactions and mechanisms. So, your favorite genetic test measures what, like 200, maybe 300 SNPs out of 88 million?
Yeah.
And then people are getting like, well, what supplement, what's the protocol for this SNP, right? That's the problem. And so then I think functional medicine practitioners, even if their intentions are good, I think they propagate the sensationalism, the myopia, the reductionism, overcomplicating, and just kind of pulls people down this rabbit hole of confused consumerism at the expense of overlooking the foundations of health.
I think it's interesting what you're saying because, when it goes back to more of the marketing and the psyche, you hear from marketing companies, niche down, niche down, niche down. What are you a doctor of? And obviously, the conventional medicine world has influenced this because you go to a specialist when you have a problem with a certain organ or system. And part of this is programming us to isolate out these different organ systems. And in functional medicine, you go on many profiles on social media, and it's like, this functional medicine doctor deals with hormones. This functional medicine doctor deals with fertility. This functional medicine doctor deals with brain inflammation or neurological degeneration. And at the end of the day, great if that's your marketing pitch. But at the end of the day, what are you doing behind the scenes? Because that's not how it works. Everything is integrated, hence the name of my company forever. but everything is working together. And what you're describing with, these SNPs and looking at genetics, I think it's great for people to want to research and learn about these things.
Mm-hmm.
But what they have to understand is that's what it is. This is
Mm-hmm.
not to research enough to define yourself, to label yourself as now having a limitation. Oh, I have MTHFR. I don't detox well. Oh, I have MTHFR. So now I'm going to have neurological issues at this age. Like, that's not the point. The point is to understand more about your body, understand more about the biochemistry, and then also allow that to play a role in the decisions that you make and the environmental factors that you expose yourself to. If you
Mm-hmm.
have compromised MTHFR, like, you shouldn't necessarily be consuming certain things dietary wise. There's certain medications that are going to be more problematic from you. Anesthesia might be more problematic for you. And, the list goes on. So it's just a piece of data. And that's the thing that bothers me the most, is that why are we honing in on one thing? And then a person becomes obsessed with this idea, or they now create a lot of limits on themselves because of this idea of what their physiology is, or what their situation is. And it's just
Mm-hmm.
not how it works.
No, well, and I think you mentioned data earlier. I would say one of the biggest things that I just constantly am preaching, and it's the antidote to all this, and it's just objectivity at the end of the day. With me, like on my podcast trailer, I talk about how spirituality and spiritual practice is the subjective pursuit of truth. Science is the objective pursuit of truth. And both are equally important to me. Certainly I am a very esoteric minded guy, but I also think it's important to keep your feet on the ground of objective reality. And if there's so many layers to it, because there's this whole like sociological factor of, I think a lot of us are kind of being immobilized of, the internet is seducing us into kind of this matrix fantasy of experience whatever you want, right? And a lot of content on social media feels extremely self-indulgent, if I'm being honest. And so then you mix in the sensationalism or the fear mongering or the myopia and kind of what we're talking about. But the antidote to all of it is objectivity. Every single day, I get tons of comments on, my posts of like, well, how do you fix this? Or like, how do I know if I have this? And it's like, you test, you get the objective data to
Yeah.
know if that's a problem. How do you know if you fixed it? You test again to see if you fixed that individual problem. Like, that's what got me into lab testing in the beginning of my career. Was all of my clients were just like general, weight loss clients. They were just normal American people that wanted to get a little healthier, get a little fitter. But of course, a lot of them, as a client-centered coach using effective psychological coaching language, well, how do you want to measure success along your journey?
Yeah.
Well, I'll just go based on how I feel or how I feel like I look. Or it's like, no, we need objective parameters that are sensitive and accurate and reproducible for your specific goals, right? Because look, if you're overweight and pre-diabetic, I bet your insulin and HbA1c and lipids and liver enzymes and leptin, that's all going to go down before you see a change on the scale or feel a change in how your clothes are fitting or all these things. So objectivity is the name of all of it, because you just have people chasing root causes, and kind of latching on to these theories and these ideas. I was recently consulting with a practitioner. I was caught off guard by how much I got triggered by it, where I was consulting with, this young girl struggling with like anxiety and fatigue and all these things. And her older sister was kind of a practitioner and very like Lyme mold focused.
Yes.
And look, I mean, I like to think I know about as much about Lyme and mold as about anybody. And, she was kind of putting this idea of out there, well, I think she has Lyme and mold. And I know she does. And it's like,
Don't we all?
I don't think it's helpful to be throwing around scary labels whimsically, right?
Exactly.
I think our generation over pathologizes everything. And that is a sickness in itself. When you start labeling yourself, if I have all these, scary root cause things, it creates a a nocebo response, which is something I've been preaching about a lot lately, is, that psychosomatic, like you're stressing
Belief.
yourself out, you're creating
Yeah.
all this anxiety and worries. So, but objectivity at the end of the day, using the right biomarkers to objectively know, is this even a relevant problem for you? And a
Yeah.
lot of times it might not be.
And even adding to what you're saying, what I would say is the objectivity, but also the perception. And I say this because I think that, and I can guarantee you've experienced this level of duality when it comes to the healing process of good and bad. Sometimes you run markers after you get started with someone, and let's say you're 2 months or 3 months in, and you're going and reviewing some markers that were originally out of range. And sometimes those markers are not quote unquote better, but they're actually responding exactly the way they are supposed to based on the detox protocol that you're implementing, or whatever you're implementing as phase one of that healing process. And so I think that our job is to help people understand what progress looks like,
Mhm.
because there are plenty of individuals, they're like, I want to lower my cholesterol. Fantastic. Well, guess what? Your liver is extremely compromised and you have fungal issues throughout your cardiovascular system. So we're not going to see positive changes in your cholesterol levels until we deal with these issues. And depending on how your body responds, this could be a short amount of time. It could be a longer amount of time. Everybody's different. So let's stop focusing on that number. That's really just psychosomatic because you just want to see it look better, even if it doesn't mean that you're overall healthier. But my goal for you is to actually be healthier and to
Mhm.
help to resolve these underlying issues that are creating a ticking time bomb for neurological degeneration and heart attack and all of these other scary things. So, there's so much deprogramming that
Mhm.
we need to be doing as practitioners. This idea of people just thinking there's good, there's bad, there's right, there's wrong, there's this one thing that must be the reason for all of it. I think it just comes back to these foundational principles of, you know, do your major organ systems work the way they're supposed to? Or are they completely compromised because of the series of compounding years and years and years of different lifestyle choices?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, it's like you can find problems if you go digging enough. And something a lot of times I'm, training practitioners on is we do have to delineate between like biomarkers that have established clinical significance and or diagnostic value versus a biomarker that's really research purposes only versus a functional lab test that a lot of these biomarkers on functional labs do not have established clinical significance. Now, it doesn't mean that there's no value to that data, but it's not clearly defined of what that really means. And so from, it's one of those things of like, how can we really objectively qualify clinical progress if we're not using clinically sound, relevant data, right? And, this is not stuff that, consumers would know how to do. I mean, hell, a lot of practitioners are confused as shit. You know what I mean? Like there's new tests, new biomarkers constantly. But this is where like you look at the trends in the physiology, you're seeing how, different markers that are relevant to their health goals are changing. Obviously, there's going to be an organic flux. We all know health isn't linear, it's up and down. But man, definitely overcomplicating things a lot. And it's making sure that like the metrics of health are relevant to their specific goal and using very sensitive data points. Because I think there's a lack of follow through. A lot of times when I'll get like a new client, they might have, a stack of, previous labs from the past 10 years and all these other practitioners that they've worked with. But a lot of times there's not any retesting. Like, they did this
Yep.
test one time, they did that test one time, they did this other test one time. But
Yep.
where's the follow through? Like,
Yeah.
in my humble opinion, it's like, you should have years and years of blood work where you're seeing a lot of
Yeah.
the foundational markers and you see the trend over the course of time. Like that's where you monitor the physiology. That's where you can see what's getting better, what's getting worse over the course of time.
I
And
think,
these
in
days
my
we have so many
opinion,
great biomarkers.
with that though, this is more on like the business side. That's a practitioner issue, because how many practitioners have a proven proprietary process to say, this is what we do to get all of our data points. This is what we do to reevaluate. This is when, we expect to see, changes by this percentage at this time period. That's how I design my programs. So I don't work with people a la carte, because doing this for 10 years, it's exactly what you're saying. Like, did I help this person or did I not? Do they know if they've been helped or do they not? They're just on to the next. And I realized that it wasn't necessarily their fault in some instances, is they didn't know what to do, because I wasn't clear as a practitioner to say, this is the process. And if you follow the process, I've done this long enough to know that this is what you can expect in this time period. And so, in certain situations, there are people that are like, heck yeah, that's the model that I want to be in. And then there's other people that say, I just want to get a little protocol and move on with my life. Fantastic. I'm not the doctor for you. But, I've been able to see what you're talking about, seeing these markers, like dramatic things, like autoimmune liver conditions resolving. And like, that's the best feeling in the world and the best information you can give to a client, to say, look how powerful your body is. It's not that your body isn't going to have issues later down the line at some point, because life is life and stressors are stressors. But like, this is a reminder of how resilient you are. And I don't think that there are a lot of practitioners talking about that, talking about the body's power, the power of the mind, and the fact that we are very resilient with the right tools and the right strategy. Because I always say to people, it's not about what you do, it's about how you do it. You could take 55 supplements. If they weren't the right supplements for you, you're not going to see a change. Oh, I tried infrared sauna. I didn't like it. It made me feel sick. Fantastic. Did you try infrared sauna in combination with other things that support your lymphatics and your liver? Oh, no, I didn't do that. Well, it's not that it was bad for you. It was just probably you stirred things up and you didn't have enough support for the rest of the body. And so, like, that's what I love doing, is this educational piece, because people are swimming in such mixed information, overwhelming information. And I think you really hit the nail on the head with talking about this idea of these sensational, provocative posts. Like, I'm so done with social media, and I keep being part of it because I want to continue to educate on that platform. But it's like you said, is people are getting sidetracked from the big flashy thing that actually has no clinical relevance, and if anything could potentially become harmful. We were talking about Ozempic and things like that, and it's just being marketed as this blanketed solution. And no.
I mean, it's wild. I mean, I like I was saying before, I think these days everybody kind of over pathologizes. I also think victim mentality is just rampant, and you see it all the time, like the clients, the patients that really transform their health and transform their life. They're resilient, they work hard, they're committed. It's just a different archetype, and it's like 1 in 50 or something. Like, it's not everybody. And unfortunately, in today's world of instant gratification and AI, and with the Ozempic thing is a great example, which I'm blown away at how big it's gotten. I mean, it makes sense. Like, it's the most miracle weight loss drug ever created so far. So I get it. I understand why it's gotten so big. But it's weird to me to see how polarized it's gotten, because like, I'll post about Ozempic, and I really only have the one post, but I recycle it every 2-3 months. And every time I repost it, I kind of put like a little bit of a different spin on it to see if it changes the way people react to it, and it does. Because the whole point of the post is more so like, hey, Ozempic, that's a thing, that's an option. And if you want to go that route, good for you. Do it well, do it responsibly, do it functionally, minimum effective dose, blah, blah, blah. Know the potential risks. But my whole thing as a unlicensed practitioner that can't prescribe and has no interest in prescribing is like, I want to teach people how to harness their body's natural endogenous GLP-1. But it amazes me how much people kind of freak out about it one way or the other, as if it's all good or all bad. And the reality is there's a lot of, as an American in America, I can't speak for everybody, but, Americans, now that there's so much access to Ozempic, because every practitioner with a medical license, they're happy to prescribe Ozempic. It's good cash flow. It's a great business model. It's easy cash flow. Everybody wants it. But, we're already seeing and hearing all these not so good stories of, like, even just the other day, I was talking to a nurse and some of these patients of, like, okay, they get put on Ozempic. They haven't really been taught anything about nutrition or lifestyle first. And then they're having like stomach paralysis and constipation. So then they're given like Miralax to ameliorate the constipation caused by the Ozempic. And then they're hungry and having cravings. So they reach for a Snickers bar. And it's like, okay, why don't we just do basic holistic nutrition, lifestyle, fitness foundations, see how far that gets us. And if you want to sprinkle in a little Ozempic on top, right? But that's kind of part of the problem, is we have this high degree of accessibility, but still kind of a very low educational level when it comes to what builds health at a, populace level. So it's a little noisy these days.
Yeah. And, I think that the quick and fast answer to the question of, why don't we teach people just to, understand more about nutrition? It's, the quick and easy answer is people want to just keep going, doing. And, taking some type of pill or some other type of solution is the easy route. But, now living in Italy, I feel like we've taken the basic things out of life in America. There is not many individuals here that don't know how to cook a meal, don't understand what seasons produce is grown. Like, it's embedded here and it was never lost. And, you walk through a grocery store and you ask the majority of individuals walking around that grocery store, of this produce area, what's in season, they can't answer that question. And if you say, if you can only shop and get produce and protein, can you cook yourself a decent meal? And the answer is, oh, I could throw it on the barbecue. Most people don't know how to actually curate a meal for themselves. And so, this is a very unfortunate reality that a lot of people just don't have any interest in changing. They rather keep scrolling or keep doing things that essentially decline their mental health and raise that, that stress response in the nervous system. So it's such a grand issue that people really have to take an interest in saying, I'm done with this. I want to know I want to understand more of the simple things of life, how to curate a meal for myself, how to teach my kids to do the same. And I know, and I'm sure you've been through periods of time, it's like when you get busy and you're an entrepreneur and you're driven and you have this vision, like, we even lose sight of it sometimes. But no one around you is saying, what are you doing? You gotta eat something. Like, they're just like, keep going, make that money. You're gonna get there. It's like we're cheering that lifestyle on, opposed to saying, you're going to burn yourself out. And then you're going to sit back one day and say, what was it all for? So I'm going to create a commune and you're invited. No.
No. Well, that's what's kind of like, times are getting weird. There's more options than ever. Because, like, I kind of see both sides of it. Something that I see, like, within the functional medicine space, and I'm thinking of a lot of really big companies in our industry. But there is a shift going towards, like, the traditional model is, these companies serve healthcare practitioners, and then the healthcare practitioners serve the consumers, the clients, the patients. Now everything is going to more of like a direct to consumer model. Everything is starting to shift to, because people, we call them consumers, but people, people want to be educated. They want to have the education to make their own informed decisions. And so that's where everything's going. And that is kind of like capitalism is like a double-edged sword, right? Because it's like the market goes where the demand goes, it goes where the customers go. So if the customers start becoming more educated and they're asking the more educated questions and they're being more scrutinous about, what supplements do I buy? What lab testing do I buy? So it's all very consumerism driven, but then it's very like trend driven. Cause then you look at like with nutrition, it's crazy to me thinking back to the beginning of my career and how much nutrition and diet trends rather has changed. We overcomplicate it so much. And now it's like we have all these like factions and factionism of like, oh, I'm a carnivore, I'm a vegan. And just the polarization in itself is kind of a disease. But the commune comment is kind of interesting because there is that, there's still like hustle culture is still going, but there's also this like, okay, alcohol is no longer in style, right? And now here's what's funny about it though, Nicole, between you and me, a lot of it is just ego driven. Like the majority of it is all ego driven because the ego wants to identify with something different, something unique. We all want to feel like a special snowflake. And it's ironic going back to what I was saying about, genetics, where it's like all human beings are 99.9% genetically identical. It's that 0.01% that makes us different. And so like we squeal so much about bioindividuality, and yet it's like 99.9% of the foundations of health, it's going to be the same from one person to the next. Like, if you're focused on the 0.01 of, well, how do I treat this SNP? Right. And it's like you're completely losing the big picture, right? So, but the whole like, commune, there are more and more people that are so fed up with this sort of matrix capitalistic nonsense that, people are, wanting to move to other countries or move off the grid and everything. And I like seeing that movement of this, like back to nature, back to community, screw this messed up virtual system that we've created. Let's unplug and get back to our basic roots,
Yeah. I was joking with Nick when we were first talking about moving to Italy. And I was like, dude, I'll pick grapes. Like, I can pick grapes. Like, I can do that.
Yeah.
I feel very fortunate that the work that I do, I have the ability to do it just like this, through virtual consultation. And I still have a team out in the States that's helping, with the other aspects of the business. But, I will say there is something to being in nature more and picking lemons from the lemon tree in your yard. It's healing on an energetic level, on a mental level. It's a different way of life that I never in a million years thought I would be embarking on. Because if you asked me even 10 years ago, I was like, I'm going to build an empire. And am I interested in still making a global impact? 100%. But the definition of that, or the vision of that for me now, is very, very, very different. So
I think I just want to like be a cannabis and mushroom farmer at this point. Like that's what really resonates with me.
There's room on the commune, so don't you worry.
Yeah.
All right. So I know we talked about a lot of different things, and if we were to give the audience, let's say 1 to 3 major misconceptions that they need to keep their eyes open for when it comes to mixed information that's creating this level of dysfunction in functional medicine, what would you say it would be? And I know this is like a super difficult question, but hey, we're going to roll with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is, and there's a lot of layers to it, but I mean, the number one thing is be objective in your healing. It's something I'm posting about often and everything. And when I say being objective, and I'll be doing different educational things because, a podcast, we keep it sort of high level and everything, and it does get very individualized, right? But specifically, objectivity means like tracking your symptoms objectively, tracking, when I work with a private client, the way I'm assessing progress is kind of 3 different dimensions of perceived quality of life using a questionnaire, perceived symptomatology. Now, perception is subjective,
Yep.
but then, the objective layer is the biomarkers, right?
Yeah.
So I think, it would really benefit people to be doing, at least basic, if not comprehensive blood work, at least twice a year, tracking some of these core markers. Maybe sometimes you look into more exotic markers, but tracking the physiology or some kind of objective data point. That's where, the wearables are great these days, the Oura rings and the Whoop bands and the HRV and the continuous glucose monitors, because it's objective data, it's specific, it's sensitive. So I just think that objectivity is really step one. The objectivity would cut through so much of the noise. But then the second big thing that I've been saying for a long time, when you're looking at all these health influencers, rather than like looking at what each person like specializes in and what their niche and what their sort of area of focus or interest, like don't focus on what everybody's saying different, focus on what we're all saying in common.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We all preach for sleep hygiene and stress management and exercise and whole food nutrition and hydration. We all preach about these foundational things, but everybody's sort of squabbling over like the hypotheticals and the theoretical nitpickiness and the myopic stuff. So objectivity and foundational work, that's really where it is.
Yeah, I very much agree. And I think that it's taking that objectivity also into what you're seeing that piques your interest on these social platforms. It was a very comical, but I think it was on TikTok, and there was an individual who debunked an influencer promoting one of those hydrogen water bottles.
I think I saw that.
And this woman was an influencer, and she said, because water has no hydrogen in it, that's why you need to hydrogenate it through this bottle. And he just pulls up H2O. He's like, yep, H2 means two hydrogens, but that's okay. Everything's fine.
Yeah. I know the exact video that you're talking about.
I was like, wow, it's so true. If you see something that piques your interest, it's just, do some research, reclaim your common sense.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of things out there that seem great, but maybe are not. And I think that this idea of it's not about what you do, but how you do it is probably my takeaway for the audience. And I've said this a million times in many webinars, but there's a lot out there, from different diets, as you were mentioning, from different therapies and medical devices and PEMFs and infrared saunas and lymphatic drainage and compression. There's a million things. And so it doesn't mean everything is what you need. And in some instances, maybe not anything, depending on you, the objectivity of what your data is saying about where your body is at, where your mind is at. So it's like we need our practitioner to be our partner. They need to have a vested interest in really wanting to be that investigator and give us the data that's valuable, but then also help us to navigate what do we do about that data.
Well, and to your point, sort of as we wrap up, the approach that I take, and maybe it's my background, maybe it's just the way my brain works, but I very much I do have, and there's a specific client in my head that I'm thinking about. My clients will ask for very precise recommendations from me, and that's not how I roll. In my practitioner students, they're like, Brendan, give me the protocol, and it's like there is no the protocol. The way that I operate and the way I believe most practitioners should be operating is, no, we educate, empower, we present options, and we essentially are helping them structure their own little mini experiments. That's how it should be, not this dictator, I tell you what to do. People's compliance are going to be a lot higher if they were the ones that decided to do it, if they created their own plan. So it's a lot like parenting, where you present your child with, you don't want to give them too many options. Like, what kind of ice cream do you want? Do you want Rocky Road, vanilla, chocolate, strawberry? Don't give them too many options, because they're going to get, it's like, do you want vanilla or chocolate? Make the decision. Great. Were you happy with that decision? Maybe next time go with the vanilla, right? Keep it simple. It's a lot of parenting.
I'm dying laughing because these are like regular conversations with baby Q. So I totally get it. Totally get
I
it.
believe it. I believe it.
But that kid's got a personality. So he pretty much like puts me in my place on a daily basis. So here we are.
Believe it.
Oh, now I'm like totally forgot my like ending point that it was really good in my brain.
I'm sure it was.
Oh,
It'll come back.
oh yes. I think that, the biggest thing is the goal of this podcast was to shed some light on where functional medicine can be perceived as dysfunctional. It could be perceived as not a good option, or it could be perceived as, scammy, or whatever the negative connotations are happening. But it's really just there are some factors that are playing into this. And as we talked about, social media is definitely disillusioning some people. Don't get me wrong. You can go on Google and type in like, what's the best diet for me? And that's going to be a lot of confusing mixed information as well. So I think it's really just a matter of finding the trusted practitioner that suits you as a person. So just because your friend recommended someone they like doesn't mean they're a fit for you. Everyone's needs are very different, and it's really a matter of getting the right data, knowing how to use the data, and playing that active role, as you were mentioning, in your healing process. That's what I was going to say is I struggled with when I would teach other practitioners, and I know that you're a teacher as well, because that was the question. What's the protocol? I'm like, no. That's not how it works, because everybody's needs are different. And what I kind of want to close with is one of your posts, and maybe I'll say it wrong, but I loved it, is you said something along the lines on like, you can't break your limiting beliefs when your brain is on fire, your brain is inflamed.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved that so much, because there is this focus right now on mental health, which I think is amazing and it's valuable, because it is a big part of why we become symptomatic and have chronic illness. But it's like everyone is different. I have worked with some individuals that they needed to balance the biochemistry and decrease that inflammation and help to balance their serotonin and dopamine levels before they even wanted to go and work on their known PTSD or work on the emotional layers to their situation. And then in other situations, it was the opposite. There were some people that those programs, those limits were so big that they needed to deal with that first. And then actually some of their biochemistry changed from that shift. And so everyone is different. And I think that's the beauty of what we do. But it's just a matter of creating that trusted partnership, practitioner to client.
Couldn't agree more. It's that co-created healing program that's going to work for you.
100%. Well, thank you so much for being here, real and raw. This is my most fun when we get to just, get weird and be disruptive. Where can everyone find you? If they are a practitioner looking to get access to some of your courses, if they are someone looking to work with you one-on-one, drop some of those URLs for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you, Nicole. You're a great friend. I clearly remember the first time meeting microbiome keynotes back in like 2019 or something. So no, it's been a pleasure. I'll look forward to running it back on my show in the coming months. And I'm not hard to find. The Holistic Savage on Instagram. That's the main platform. Got the podcast, the Holistic Savage podcast. Website is metabolicsolutions.llc.com. But Instagram, that's still the primary platform. That's kind of the big funnel. So put out a lot of good stuff out there and can, funnel their way to all the things.
You have awesome posts. They are always pique my interest. So really appreciate what you're doing in the industry. And we really hope that everyone enjoyed this episode. And the next time you hear from the two of us, we will be on the Holistic Savage podcast.
It'll be a good time. Looking forward to it.
All right, everyone. Until next time. We thank you so much for being an avid listener of Integrative You Radio, formerly known as Integrative Wellness Radio. We appreciate all of your support. We love your comments. Please visit us on social media as well as our website to see all of the fun things happening behind the scenes and the new amazing content and courses that is being rolled out on a monthly basis. We hope to see you there.